Imagine this. What if a powerful country falsely accused you of having dangerous weapons when you actually had none, and then launched a full-scale invasion against you? Would that be justice? That's exactly what happened to Iraq in 2003.
10 years ago, on March 19, 2003, President Bush announced the start of military action in Iraq, Operation Iraqi Freedom. Up next, his 5-minute address from the Oval Office.
The United States declared to the world that Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction, (WMDs). The claim stunned not only the American public, but also the United Nations and key allies. Like, people wondered, is this true? But when the war began, no such weapons were found, no evidence, nothing that justified the war. So the real question remains, if the weapons didn't exist, why was the war launched? Was it all about oil? Was it a move to control the Middle East? Or a fabricated front in the so-called war on terror? This one lie cost hundreds of thousands of lives and dragged America into a quagmire it still struggles to escape. And this was just the beginning. The shocking truth that followed tell a much darker story. The Iraq War began with a claim that the world would later call one of the greatest lies in modern history. In 2003, US President George W. Bush and British Prime Minister Tony Blair convinced the world that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction, WMDs. They warned that Saddam Hussein could pass these weapons to terrorist organizations, posing a direct threat to America and its allies. These claims were based on flawed intelligence and questionable sources, later proven to be false. UN inspectors repeatedly stated that no such weapons had been found in Iraq. Yet the US ignored these reports and went ahead with war. In reality, Saddam Hussein had no link to the 9/11 attacks and no ties to Al-Qaeda. Still, a sovereign nation was attacked based on false justification. This was not only a moral failure, but a strategic one. Its consequences are still being felt today. The US framed the removal of Saddam Hussein as a major success, but in reality, it triggered a disastrous chapter for Iraq. Yes, Saddam's regime was authoritarian, but it held the country together. Once he was removed, a power vacuum emerged that no one could fill. The US disbanded the Ba'ath Party, leaving thousands of experienced military officers, government workers, and police jobless. Many of them joined insurgencies and extravagant groups. Long-suppressed sectarian tensions between Sunnis, Shias, and Kurds erupted violently. Civil war and bombings became routine. Rather than a unified state, Iraq turned into a battlefield of competing factions. The so-called freedom brought after Saddam's fall quickly morphed into deadly chaos, destroying millions of lives and Iraq's very foundation. The Iraq War was a disaster not just politically and morally, but also financially and humanly. The US spent over $2 trillion, 0 cents on the war, not only on combat, but on reconstruction, veterans' healthcare, and long-term costs. That money, if invested in healthcare, education, or infrastructure, could have transformed American society. More tragic than the financial loss was the human cost. Nearly 4,500 American soldiers were killed and over 32,000 were wounded, many permanently disabled. But the biggest toll was paid by the Iraqi people. Estimates suggest hundreds of thousands of civilians were killed or injured, including countless women, children, and innocent men. This war didn't eliminate a major threat or bring lasting peace. It only left behind bodies, tears, and rubble. Americans were told the war was essential for national security, that Saddam had WMDs and ties to terrorists, but when the truth emerged and none of those claims held up, public trust in the US government plummeted. People began to question, was this war necessary? Were we lied to? Who benefited? The rising number of dead soldiers, the huge financial losses, and the chaos in Iraq left Americans disillusioned. The public became politically divided and increasingly skeptical of government policies. Distrust extended beyond the Bush administration, leaving a lasting legacy of doubt that future leaders have struggled to overcome. This war wasn't just fought in Iraq, it created a psychological war within America itself. One of the biggest ironies of the Iraq War is that it was supposed to fight terrorism but ended up fueling it. Under Saddam's regime, Al-Qaeda had little to no presence in Iraq, but after his fall, chaos and civil unrest gave extremist groups the perfect breeding ground. Disenfranchised Sunni, feeling marginalized under the new Shia-led government, joined insurgencies like Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which later evolved into ISIS. ISIS became a global threat, extending its terror across Syria, Libya, and beyond. So instead of destroying terrorism, the Iraq War actually created the conditions that allowed it to flourish like never before. Another unintended consequence of the Iraq War was the strengthening of Iran, the very nation the US wanted to keep in check. Saddam's Sunni-dominated government was a counterweight to Shia-majority Iran, but his removal led to a Shia-led government in Iraq, ideologically and politically closer to Iran. So financially and politically closer to Iran, financially and militarily closer to militias and political groups. Today, Iran wields considerable influence in Iraq, often opposing US interests. In trying to eliminate one enemy, the US unintentionally handed more power to another. The Iraq War didn't just destabilize the Middle East, it severely damaged America's global credibility. By invading a sovereign nation without clear evidence, the US undermined its moral standing as a promoter of democracy and international law. Defying the United Nations and acting on false intelligence raised global suspicions. Was America abusing its power? Anti-American sentiments surged in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. Even NATO allies distanced themselves. The war exposed fractures in international coalitions and sparked widespread criticism of American foreign policy. Ultimately, Iraq was not just a regional disaster, it was a global stain on America's image. The Iraq War taught the world a hard truth. Military might cannot solve every problem. The US believed that with advanced weapons and fast strikes, they could remove Saddam and quickly build a peaceful, democratic Iraq. But military success was only the beginning. Rebuilding institutions, gaining public trust, and healing sectarian divides proved far harder. Guns can remove a regime, but they cannot win hearts or build nations. Without dialogue, wisdom, and diplomacy, brute force only deepens problems. The war became a mirror, showing world leaders that sustainable peace demands strategy, not just strength. The Iraq War is a dark chapter in modern history. Driven by false intelligence, rushed decisions, and political motives, it destroyed a nation, cost countless lives, and shook the very foundation of America's global leadership. Years later, Iraq remains fragile, trapped in political turmoil, sectarian conflict, and foreign influence. America, once seen as a beacon of justice and democracy, is still recovering from the scars to its reputation. The lesson? Before using force, the truth must be clear, the goals must be just, and the vision must be long-term. Sadly, that lesson remains largely ignored. The game of power continues around the world, often at the cost of human life. The Iraq War reminds us that strategic mistakes don't just break nations, they leave wounds that last for generations. If you found this video helpful, please like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to stay updated with our future videos. Thank you.